And welcome to the stage, Jane Rupel.
Hi, everybody. I told Tyler, I haven't used a clicker in a really long time because I work so much online and remotely. So see how, hey, it works. That's my dog, Charlie. And he taught himself how to drink out of a bubbler last month. I wish I could claim this as like a triumph in my own dog training success, but he learned this all by himself, and I was lucky enough to capture it and share it with you. When I was early in my corporate L&D career, a colleague made a statement. I'm sorry, I was super distracted. There's water right there. I had no idea. If Charlie were here, he would be like lapping that up right now. If you're sitting on the other side of the room, this whole thing is a fountain. It's crazy. And there's a sign that says, please be careful, water feature. So I'm like, okay. Anyway, back to the early days of my L&D career. I had a colleague as a trainer who said, well, you know, if their behavior hasn't changed, they didn't learn it. Because really all learning is behavior. And I thought that sounded really profound, and I kind of made note of it. But I was also skeptical, right? It sounds a lot like Skinner and his mazes with rats. Kind of sounds like dog training. But it fit when we were talking about, you know, improving quality scores. And I also had a stint briefly in as a quality auditor, and so the quality version of if there's no behavior change, they didn't learn it, is if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. So, and I'm skeptical about that too, right? Because clearly we value things that are immeasurable. We must. So, anyway, the first statement about behavior change and learning really did stick with me over the decades, and I have relied on it in my career. Before coming to the corporate world, I was a high school teacher. Here in Minnesota, I taught Spanish and English. And in both those fields, good old Benjamin Bloom had a lot to shape how we thought about learning outcomes, right? And the question of what does learning look like? You've got Bloom's taxonomy all the way up from the foundational levels, you know, knowledge. Can you define it? Can you remember it? Comprehension, can you explain it well? Application. This is where in the corporate ops world, we're talking about behavior, and if we can influence it, can you do anything with those things that you learned? And then the beautiful higher order thinking skills of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, right? So there's a lot of answers to what does learning look like. If you're thinking about outcomes and you turn to Bloom, this is the cognitive domain. He also theorized and wrote about the affective domain and the psychomotor domain. But Bloom's taxonomy doesn't capture everything. Even at the beautiful critical thinking levels of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, it doesn't really explain where the aha happens, right? What about epiphany? What about wonder? What about curiosity? I have 3 adult kids. They're all really great people. I feel like that's the biggest accomplishment in my life, other than my years in teaching teenagers or working in L&D. My oldest was especially verbally gifted. And one morning, you know, she was in her high chair and I was feeding her oatmeal, and she was probably about, I'm not lying, like between 16 and 18 months old. And she looked at me and said, "Morning." And I replied, "Good morning." And she looked back at me and said, "Morning." And I replied, good morning, thinking I was going to kind of edge her along in her telegraphic speech, right? And she looked at me again, and I was kind of hoping for a good morning because I was modeling that. And she said, Dove. And I said, Dove? And she said, morning, Dove. And I was like, did you just say morning, Dove? And she did. She said morning, Dove. And then the really remarkable thing was outside the window, I heard the coo of our mourning dove, our resident mourning dove. And I was like, I was almost in tears. It's like, oh my God, she knows I'm mourning dove. And I was all alone with her at home at the time, and it was like, I need a witness, right? And then there's that thinking, like, if you don't have evidence, it didn't happen. If you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. I called my brother, who's my birding buddy, and I was like, oh my God, she knows a mourning dove. And he was like, what? And I told him the whole story, and he was like, that's amazing. And then later, when I also called my husband at the time, and I told him the story, and he was like, well, of course she does. And I said, what do you mean? Have you heard her do that? He said, no, but do you know that whenever you hear a mourning dove, you say, I hear a mourning dove. So it's another example of what learning looks like, but I couldn't find it on Bloom, right? It was pretty awesome. So it's only fair to talk a little bit about my learning too. I have a hobby, and it's riding. I've been riding since I was a kid. Inconsistently, not quality, although that might be true too, but off and on. I went to camp every summer for a week as a kid, and I'd get pretty good by the end of that week, and then it'd be a year, and then I'd go back, so yeah, that's how it was. And so I've devoted some time outside of my work career to this hobby, and I love it. And I'm sharing a few photos. This is from a horse show, adult amateur horse show, where my focus, I had really been working with my trainer on 2-point, which is the 2 points of balance being in your stirrups, your feet, and in not gripping with my knees, because that was my worst habit. Second worst. My worst habit was holding on really tight with the reins, so balancing on the bit and gripping with my knees, so gotta knock that off. And you can see how hard I'm working at it. My face is sheer concentration in this photo. Otherwise, it's a pretty good picture. This is from the same show. It's a different angle, and if there are any equestrians in the audience, I'm well aware that there's more to my jumping position to work on besides 2-point and release, but those are the things we really focused on, was balance on the stirrups, let go with your knees, and release the reins so the horse can use their head and neck. And I'm doing it. And even as big as this screen is, from here I can't quite tell, but if you could see it more closely, you can see the look on my face. My jaw is clenched, my eyes are not shut, but I'm really squinching my face, and my shoulders are practically in my ears. So it turns out that the thing getting in the way of that behavior change for me, for the longest time, was fear. So it wasn't that I didn't learn it, it was that I didn't trust myself. And maybe with good reason, because I've been injured a few times in this sport that I love. And I have one more photo, and this is from a clinic that my barn put on with the U.S. equestrian coach, Daniel Stewart, and he's amazing. And I am laughing. My shoulders are where they should be. My balance is really good. We were playing a game. He put us through jump courses with puzzles, like mental puzzles, that we had to throw us questions and we had to answer them as we were doing our things. And his intention was to give us enough distraction and enough stress to reinforce that when you really know something, you need to be able to do it and not lose sight of what you know because there's distraction or you're stressed or it's difficult. And so it was crazy and it was super fun, and I'm laughing. And so my fear was replaced by joy and my writing improved tremendously. If you remember the top level of Bloom's taxonomy in the cognitive domain, it's evaluation, which is, and I really want to get this quote right. So evaluation is the ability to make judgments about information based on set criteria or standards, right? Set criteria and standards. And I mentioned I've been injured a few times. And people don't age in reverse, right? These photos are 3 years old. And I kind of had a hard look at what it costs me to recover from an injury these days and what I'm willing to risk. And so in terms of risk assessment, I made an evaluation and a judgment to stop jumping. I still ride. I just picked up a new discipline, dressage, which is all done on the ground. It's very calm and lovely. And I thought it would be boring, but it turns out it's not. I'm learning a ton. So I want to come back to my Charlie story. How did Charlie teach himself to get a drink out of a bubbler? And I live in a historic neighborhood in Madison, and this is our neighborhood park. It's called the Period Garden Park because the gardens reflect the period of the houses around them. And there's a fountain in the left-hand picture with a cardinal in it. And I know that many of you here in this room from Minnesota would also call that on the right a fountain, but you're wrong, it's a bubbler. You're allowed to drink out of a bubbler. You're not allowed to drink out of a fountain unless you're a bird. So this bubbler is nearly identical to the one in the video that you saw at first. It's a standard city issue Parks Department bubbler. The difference between them is this has excellent water pressure so that when you press that button, the stream arcs out over the edge of the basin, and there's a strategically placed dog bowl. I have 2 dogs. They're both standard poodles, so they're very smart. Scout is the older one, and he has he's like the quintessential refined poodle, and he's very dainty and proper, and he drinks out of the bowl. Charlie is a mess, and he loves to drink from a stream or a sprinkler or hose, or he would, like I said, I'm not even kidding, he'd be all over this fountain. So when I press that button to fill that dog dish, Scout waits and drinks out of the bowl, and Charlie drinks out of the stream. And it's just a thing that we've been doing, and it's a block from my house, so we're there all the time. Well, one day, I was walking Charlie. It was very hot, and we came upon one of these, and he recognized it, so that's comprehension, right? Or no, I guess that's knowledge. But he recognized it. And I pressed the button, and the pressure is really, really low. So I put my other hand in there to divert the stream, and he lapped it up. And then the next time we walked by, it might have been a day or 2 days later, I pressed the button, and he hopped up and put his paws on there and drank right out of the stream. And then the third time, it really only took 3 times, he walked himself over, put his paws up, and looked at me, and I pushed the button. So yeah, the video is a really great physical proof of his learning outcome. And this is the psychomotor taxonomy. It was a researcher named Elizabeth Simpson expanded on Bloom's concepts and built this ladder. And I think this is just a really good description of Charlie's experiences with drinking water and learning how to transfer all those skills to the complex one of drinking out of a fountain, bubbler. He'll try to drink out of the fountain, I don't let him. Creating new movement patterns to address novel problems or situations. And that's my dog. I'm really proud of him, and I wish I had taught him that. So really, the thing that I want to leave you with, aside from these cute stories about babies and animals, is that, it's always important to ask what learning looks like. And we need to think about what the process looks like as well as what the outcome looks like. We have all been schooled in how to write an objective. We've been schooled in thinking about the outcome. But we really need to think about the process so that it can inform our instruction. So that's what I want to leave you with today. Thank you.